And last few weeks, we've been talking about Moses. And I've learned now in my approach to this that it takes more than 1 week for each not-so-superhero to be talked about. So you're going to have to bear with me this week because I wanted to do this next one, and I'm going to try my best to get it done in 2 weeks. So today you're going to endure some things. All good things. But we're going to get through one of my favorite characters as a kid to read about. I'm finding a comic book cover for each of these, by the way. And I really enjoy this one because that is like the best scene of anything I ever read as a 12-year-old boy. And if you know what scene it is, just wait. No spoiler alerts. Or pretend like we're watching Endgame together or something. You can't share the secrets of what's going on. We're going to be talking about Samson, and out of all the not-so-superheroes, Samson is very super in strength and in a lot of other ways physically, but what he lacks is a whole lot of emotional stability. What he lacks is impulse control. What he lacks is anger management. He has a lot of issues that also, as a young 12-year-old boy, I felt I had too. Minus maybe the super strength and not quite yet the long hair, but I got there. You won't believe it. I got pictures. I won't show them. I have them. Samson might be the best biblical character for Uncle Ben's statement, with great power comes great responsibility. You're like, who's Uncle Ben? If you said that, there'll be time for confession there. Spider-Man reference, but it's okay. I don't want to assume. What's really cool as we start to look through the Judges, God chose to use judges to bring his people back to him. At this time, Israel didn't have a king yet. God was their king. This is how it should always be for God's people. After the Judges go through, all of God's people decided everybody else has a king. They're doing well. We need one too. But prior to that statement, God chose the most unlikely people to step up and to return his people back to him in a way that sometimes will blow your mind. This is one of those stories. So, confession time. As a young boy, I grew up at a church not too far from here. It's called Parkway. We had a really great guy who was our minister. His name was Don. Don? I just said Don. I'm not going to say his last name yet. Don Kern. I wanted to know. I knew his last name. I was going to say Don never aged. He was always old to me. And he was like an adoptive grandparent to me. I spent a couple weeks with him when my parents got married. And I'll be honest, there are times as a young kid that I was bored out of my mind. It's confession time, right? And as I was sitting in our rows of chairs, pretending to listen, I opened the Bible all the time and I read the story of Samson. Why? Because a lot of things in the story of Samson I was not allowed to watch as a young kid, and I thought I was getting away with something. The story was amazing. And I'm a guy who I think may have had ADD. Reading was not something that I was excited to do because my brain would wander and then I have to reread things over and over again. But I would read this story of Samson and I was like, man, this is such an awesome book. And as I got older, I started to realize Samson was messed up. There was something wrong within him to do what he was doing. So, if ever I bore you and you want to read a story, I don't mind if you pretend to listen and open up Samson. Hopefully after this week and the next week, you'll get a little more understanding of what he's about. Okay, so this is where I said we got to all be ready. We're going to jump through not all 3 chapters at this point, but we're going to get through a lot today. So hold on, be ready. There's a lot of crazy things that go down. Every start of the Judges that you will see is this statement. It starts with again. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. God delivers his people into the hands of not so great people to remind them they need him. So all of these stories of Judges, you will see a statement like this. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Sometimes we forget that God's people aren't Americans, but if we put our names in there too, I'm almost positive we could say, again, God's people, who could be all of us who believe that Christ is the Son, whatever, we've done some evil in the eyes of the Lord. Sometimes he uses things to correct us back to him, but we have this beautiful thing that we're getting to of a perfect superhero that we end with, which is Christ. So I want to give you that tease to know that the greatest one chosen to be our truest hero, one that brings salvation, is Christ. These are just ways that we see that not so perfect people were used to do amazing things for the glory of God, whether they knew it was going to be through them or not. And so you can look around at all of you, you can even point a finger at yourself, and realize that you have some superhero qualities that God is going to use, regardless of if you choose to use it for him or not. We see as we go on through these stories that when we choose to use those for him, great things happen, not just for us, but for the kingdom. Okay, so the Philistines are going to be ruling over the Israelites for 40 years. A certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was childless and unable to give birth. This is our origin story of Samson. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or fermented drink, and that you are not to eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." I want to start with this. There is zero to do with Samson's superpowers that come from Samson himself. All of the things that are great that are going to happen to Samson come from a covenant that God made with his mom and his father. This kid is going to be dedicated from the time that he's not even born yet. From in the womb until the day he dies, his life is to be dedicated in a covenant to serving God. Talk about the pressure. Many of you might have been raised by a parent who said, "You're going to be a doctor. I won't hear anything else. You go through school. No, you need to do better in these science classes. You're going to be a doctor. That's it for you. That's it." Now, could you imagine before you're born, you are going to be the servant of God. You are going to do some things that you don't even know about. I don't know about you. I don't know if I would rise to that perfect feeling of being God's servant from the time I was born till the time I die. And you know what? Samson doesn't get there either. But here's where we fast forward. You got your Bibles ready? Every superhero has their issues. With Superman, it's kryptonite. Well, I can't say all of them. Some of them is pride. Most of them is some kind of pride that they think they can get away with everything and be okay. With Iron Man, he thought he was smarter and knew everything, but yet he still had his issues with his group. Batman, all of them, they all have something, right? Samson's deal is this. He's impulsive. He has kind of a lust issue. And boy, does he get angry. Does that sound like anything that you might have for yourself? You don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to. I'm not calling on you. When I read through Samson's story, I start to think about what in this story is applicable to me. How do we bring this to relevance to our own lives today? What does this do for us? I said earlier that there's only one character really that gets this with great power comes great responsibility thing. As Samson starts to live through his life, he starts to understand all these things that are given to him, he makes some really hasty choices. And there's some big consequences that come with those choices, but the underlying tone in all of this is God had a plan through him regardless. And it's a surprise. Samson holds things back from his parents. He holds things back from his wives. He's not so truthful. He does a lot of things that you go, why would God choose a man like this? Well, let's find out. We're going to go through this quick. Go back and reread this. If you have a Bible app on your phone and you commute, it'll read it for you. If you're like me. All right. We skip from his birth, and we're going to go all the way to chapter 14. Samuel chapter 14. Samson went down to Timnah and he saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Can you imagine today, guys, wouldn't that make dating so much easier? All you gotta do is see somebody and then go, Mommy, I really want that nice car. No, it's Mommy, I want that lady. She looks pretty. He's always led with his eyes, Samson. Guys and gals, we have this problem of being led with our eyes sometimes. Later in the New Testament, it talks about our eyes being windows to our souls. And when they are filled with light, what a glorious light that is. But when they are filled with darkness, how deep is that darkness? When our eyes are fixed on things that aren't of God, we will be led to make some really dumb choices. When our eyes are not fixed on the goodness that God has for us, we will find ourselves in situations that are going to be to our detriment. But that doesn't mean that God still can't breathe life into those situations. So let's look what happens. One, he's got some interesting. Okay. His father and mother replied this: Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to an uncircumcised Philistine to get a wife? Do you ever forget to listen to your parents? Or purposely choose not to? Samson is a great story that you can read your kids and say, when you don't listen to your parents, bad things will happen to you. Trust us. We've been there. We get it. We know things. We've made our mistakes. Listen to our wisdom. But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's the right one for me. Anybody? Anybody had a bad relationship? Somebody warned you and you were blinded because they were just so pretty, so good looking? Right. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. There's a lot of things that are happening. And what ends up happening in our lives too is that you may be going through something. You may be hesitant to give your approval of something because something inside you says maybe this isn't right. And just know this, that even in those moments, that God may be doing something within you or your situation that is for His purpose, for His kingdom, for His work to be done that you have no clue about. This is a situation where they're like, I really don't want my son to go and to do this thing because I know what it's going to bring him. But yet, his parents didn't know this, but this was from God. This was an opportunity where God was going to use this man to do something that he needed done, even though the situation in itself might not be the best one. Okay, I'm going to hit hyperspeed here. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and his mother, and they approached the vineyards of Timnah. Suddenly, a young lion came roaring toward him. I read this little preschool Bible book with Grayson when he was little. And his favorite story to go to was, can we read about the man who ripped apart the lion? It's awesome. This is this moment. He takes after me. If he was in here sitting, listening to me and bored, maybe he'd be reading Samson too, and that would be okay. A lion comes roaring at him. Samson doesn't do what all of us would do, which is trip the person next to you and run away. You can make it out. I know you. That's why we work out, so we can be faster than the other person. But instead, the Spirit of the Lord came on him, and he ripped apart the lion with his bare hands like he would a young goat. But listen, this is how Samson is. He does this, but what does he do? He doesn't tell his father or his mother what he had done. I look at that at first glance and I go, why is that important? And how did they not hear a roaring lion? How far apart are these people walking? There's all these things that come up. But the important part is something big, really big happened. And yet he chose, I'm going to keep that a secret. How does that pan out? He went down and talked to this woman and he liked her. Now it's really weird. The timelines of these are really weird. He sees a woman, I like her, make her mine. Let's go down together, Dad, so that you can talk to their parents into letting me have this woman. So he goes down, talks with her for a little bit after ripping apart a lion, some just interesting line, and says, yeah, she's good. So then it fast forward sometime later, when he went back to marry her, I have no idea the interaction between these two occurrences. Seems like not much. And it seems like that carries on to this relationship too. Sometime later, he goes back to marry her. He turned aside to look at the lion's carcass that he ripped apart. And inside of it, there were some bees making honey. This is the weirdest story ever. Do you see why this is such a cool story to look at? Not only does he see this, but he says, I'm going to scoop some of that out and eat it and give some to my parents. So he does this. And there's something else that happens, right? But he did not tell them where he had taken the honey from. It's continual, right? I'm sure they asked, I just got it from somewhere. Don't worry about it, Mom. Yeah. Is it good, though? It is good, right? It's because it's made in this beautiful casting of dead carcass. I don't know. He doesn't want to tell him. So his father went down to see the woman, and Samson was going to hold a feast. And it was customary there, this also seems weird, for the people around them to choose 30 men to be his companions. I find this weird because he's going to a foreign place. He wants to have a wife, and while he's there, they decide who get to be his friends for a wedding feast. It's like a bachelor party that he doesn't get to choose. And Samson, being the smug guy that he is, his first instinct is this. Hey guys, I got something for you. You want to bet me? I got a riddle. If you can give me the answer to this riddle in 7 days of this feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. You're going to need a walk-in closet after all of this. What I'm going to give you. And he says, if you can tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. So he's thinking, I'm making out like a bandit. I'm going to have the finest clothes. Watch out. Tell us your riddle, they said. Let's hear it. He replied, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. For 3 days, they could not give the answer. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, this is how awful these people are. Chosen to be his companions. Chosen to be the ones they get to celebrate with him. For 7 whole days, they go to his wife, and they say, coax your husband into explaining this riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property? Do you see these people? So this is what's interesting. Like, how does this have to do with us? All of this started with Samson not listening to his parents. Why do you need to go to these people? They're not like our people, which sounds weird and it sounds very exclusionary. I'm not saying this based on race or culture. They just didn't have a godly sense to them. Their instinct is, we will get what we want by any means necessary. Guess who else is falling into that trap? Samson. We'll get what I want, how I want it, when I want it, because I am Samson. Isn't that a trip? When we get stuck in what we want for ourselves and our own selfish things, our own selfish desires, we're going to make statements like that. You know what? I really want this. I will never be satisfied with my life until I get whatever it is for you. Is it more money? Better friends? Better wardrobe? People to look at you and appreciate you because all the great things that you do. Maybe you're out there and you're finding whatever it is for you that you struggle with, that you want so desperately to make you happy. That you will bypass listening to the voice of reason, that you won't listen to those who have been there and done that. Instead, it's all about you. Samson's biggest issue, besides being impulsive, and we're going to see his anger come out here in a little bit, was that it was all about Samson. I don't think he fully understood that he was called to be a servant of God from the beginning, before he was even born, that he was going to be connected in a covenant to God. But God still uses him regardless. And so this is what happens with his wife. Obviously, you would do this too, because someone just threatened to burn you and your whole household, which sounds terrible. She throws herself on him, says, you hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. This is why he didn't tell his parents. I didn't even tell my parents this. Why would I tell you? She cried for the whole 7 days. And like any male with a person who's sobbing next to them, be it your kid or your wife, okay, just take this and leave me alone. I think that's what he did. Impulsively, he said, okay, here's the answer. And he told her. And it says because she continued to press him. Next week, or in a couple of weeks when we get back to this, we're going to see another person do this to him with even greater consequences that leads to his biggest transformation. Samson liked to hold power and control in himself, but he wasn't strong enough to withstand and keep it because he kept trying to do it by himself. And when pressed, he would just give it up. And every time in his story, it had to do with bad choices of women that he had in his life. Put himself in bad situations, in bad relationships. He chose to do things that weren't appropriate for what God wanted for his life, and he kept finding himself in those positions. So he told her, and she told her people. So before the sunset of the seventh day, at the buzzer, this is like the game-winning shot, they came in and said, hey, what's sweeter than honey? It's stronger than a lion. This is how much Samson loved his wife. If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Do you see in his life possessions and people and situations? When control gets out of his hand, he copes by taking control. Are you like that? When someone pushes your button, and your button might be like, I feel like I failed, or I feel like I'm not good enough, or I feel like someone's questioning me, I'm going to overshoot it, and I'm going to regain control, because that's how I cope. And I'm going to make people know that I'm in charge, because he does something crazy. The Spirit of the Lord came on him powerfully. So this is still of God, right? This is when he gets that, like, anybody watch Popeye? Imagine the Spirit of the Lord as a can of spinach. Nobody? Pop that spinach and forearms get huge, nothing else. Forearm power. Spirit of the Lord comes on Samson, and he goes berserko. He gets green, clothes rip, cut off jean shorts, turns into the hole. He goes down to Ashkelon, and he struck down 30 of their men and stripped them of everything and came back and gave the clothes to those guys. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home. Listen now. When you get angry and everything is about you, you start to learn how to justify your actions in ways that are unjustifiable. So he was burned with anger. Samson's wife was now given away to one of those companions of the 30 who attended him at the feast. Later on, of the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to go visit his wife. You see, the story's weird. Timeline's weird. You're married, but yet you haven't been around your wife for a good season. And now you come back with a present because you want to say you're sorry because you call her a heifer. I don't know. We do this, right, guys? That's where the flowers come out. I screwed up. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But he comes, father-in-law sitting there, and he says, I'm not going to let you win because I thought you hated her and I gave her away. But look, there's her younger sister, who's more attractive. This is bad dad. Bad dad. Why don't you take her instead? Here's the justification of anger. Samson said to them, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines, and I will really harm them. Do you see when you look back at your situation, even though most of it was caused by your dumb actions, that you can look back because you're so stuck on yourself that you can blame it on everybody else? Isn't that trip? I think in this story, when it said that his parents didn't know that God was going to use this opportunity to open a door with the Philistines, that God already knew Samson's heart, and he knew that he was an angry guy, and he knew that he was vengeful, and that he knew he was going to get himself in trouble, and he knew he was going to push himself into places that he shouldn't, and so he allowed him to get into these places, but he puts the Spirit on him to do some work that needs to get done, even though it's out of the negative actions of Samson. It doesn't say that Samson's actions bring glory to God at all during these times, just so you know. We do see that later. But what we see is God is using a vengeful, angry, impulsive man and puts him in situations to choose, and he chooses a bad path every time. So now he's looking back in vengeance and in anger, and he finds reasons to hurt these people. He does something that I don't know if any of us could do. This is where the not-so-superhero powers come into play. He uses his gifts, but maybe doesn't use the best, great responsibility line. He goes out and finds a bunch of foxes and ties them together, lights them on fire, and sends them through a field. Can we say anger management needed quickly. His first thought is, in my anger, and I am justified to do this, I have a great idea. Why not go hunt down some foxes, trap them, tie their tails together, and fasten a torch to every one of them, and then send them through their wheat fields. And he burns up the shocks and the standing grain and the vineyards and the olive groves, and he hit them right in the wallet, right in feeding their people, and he felt justified. I don't know if you see this, but this is a time where we don't see the Spirit of the Lord coming onto him. Do you see it? Any of this? Man, we spend a lot of time burning some things down because people deserve it. And we felt hurt. We feel jaded. And our hearts never, ever let go of that stuff. We're not so far off like Samson. We may not go out and grab a bunch of foxes, but we go out and grab all of our words. When we set those bad boys on fire, we just start letting them loose. And we burn down relationships, burn down people. We sabotage relationships. And guess whose fault it is? Everyone else, right? We're not so far off with Samson. I don't know how surprised he was, but they got angry. Philistines asked who did this. Somebody told on him it was Samson. And the Philistines went, and guess what they did? They burned his wife and her whole house. You ever get in this battle with somebody where everything is geared on revenge and justice? You go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Nobody ever leaves happy. Just more damage. More blame. And now he has more justification. Since you acted like this, swear I'm not going to stop until I get my revenge on you. Samson's never going to be at peace and at rest because what's fueling him is anger and revenge and bitterness. You know, part one of this story, I'm going to go through real quick because there's a whole, and we're not going to get there. He attacked them viciously, slaughtered many of them. He went down and then he hid in a cave. He was so angry. And I think all of us would be, but he put this on himself, right? They came and they burned his wife and her whole family, but he had just taken out everything of them because he lost a bet that he made himself with a bunch of people and killed a bunch of people to fulfill the debt. It's a cycle of mess and anger and issues. So he goes and hides. They come, they find him. His people, I'm going to give you this Cliff Note version, go back and read it. People of Judah asked the Philistines why they came there. And they really just wanted Samson. Because he did all of this to us. Look how many people had to come and get him. And this is his own people. 3,000 men from Judah went over to the cave and said, hey dude, you just set us up. Don't you realize who's in charge of us right now? Why did you do this? And he answered them, that's what they started it. Very mature. So he said, hey, we've come to tie you up and bring you to them. And all Samson asks is, hey, just don't be the ones that try to kill me. They promised they wouldn't. They tie him up. They bring him down to the Philistines. And bound him with 2 ropes. As he starts to approach the Philistines, as they approached Lehi, the Philistines came angry, yelling. And now we see the power of God again. Comes upon him. The ropes just fly off. This is the best scene as a kid, right? He looks over and says, hey, fresh jawbone. It's going down. He struck down 1,000 men. 1,000. And he starts to brag. It goes from the Spirit of the Lord coming on him and giving strength. Who did he give the credit to? Himself. With a donkey's jawbone. I did this. I made a donkey out of them. And I killed 1,000 men. When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone and the place was called Ramoth Lehi. Because he was very thirsty, he cried out, "You've given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst?" Do you see all this stuff? Should I die now and fall into their hands now? God gives him an out, opens up this hollow place, and water came out of it, and he drank, and his strength returned. This is how this chapter ends. And out of all of that, Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. I think they were probably terrified of this leader, but God was with him. The covenant that was made to his mom was fulfilled, but Samson made a mess out of it for at least this 20 years. The next time we come together and we talk about Samson in a couple of weeks, and we'll be gone next week, we're going to see this big decline and redemption story. Every single superhero story has an origin, it has some kind of fall, and it has this great redemption. This is our story. You may be on one of those sides at this point. You may still be being led by your own selfish kind of fleshful desires that are getting you going. You may still be holding a grudge on somebody that you've been holding for 20 plus years. And every time you think of them, you're like, they better not show up to Christmas again. Last time they did, I let them know they were not welcome, right? We have these things. Whenever you feel like you're justifying that because you think it's of God, can I let you know that you're wrong? Satan's going to use that and hold that bitterness in your heart forever. You have to let those go. The moment where you see the goodness that God gives you and you start to exude it as it's all because of you, can I let you know that doesn't come from God? Humility, self-control, these are of God. Impulsivity, anger, bitterness, it's not. However, the story doesn't end there. And even though we still may be led to our own devices, that God still has a plan. As long as our hearts are open to receiving him in our lives. I hope you can come back when we get back to part 2 of Samson and we get to really see the redemption qualities that come through a mess of a life. And I hope that you know that this is what is given to us also, this amazing grace that comes through Christ. That no matter how deep and how dark our story is, that we still have a forgiveness of a Savior because his love and his grace is way bigger and way powerful than our messes and mistake. And this is what gives us hope. And this is what gives us connection to God. Let's go to God in prayer. Dear Father, you're an amazing God. And sometimes we can't explain why you love us so much. And I think that's a beautiful thing. That there is no reason you should. But even in our mess, and even when we mess it up, and we take all the credit, and we give you all the blame, you still find a way to love us and draw us to you. God, help us to have an open heart, to know that all these things that you give us is to reflect you and your goodness and your glory to the people that you put in our lives. And God, I just pray that we don't take for granted the amazing gifts that you give us, but instead we put them forward in a way that just brings people to know you, but also allows us to get to know you better too. That our hearts can be broken and opened up and allowed to pour out all of the things that we're just struggling with. Help us to know that you hold those and let us know that we're forgiven already, God. Again, we thank you for this place. We thank you for the love that only comes through your Son that we have an opportunity to do before you, God. We pray this in his name. Amen.